على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. إنا خلقنا الإنسان من نطفة أمشاج نبتليه فجعلناه سميعا بصيرا. إنا هديناه السبيل إما شاكرا وإما كفورا. إنا أعتدنا للكافرين سلاسل وأغلالا وسعيرا. إن الأبرار يشربون من كأس كان مزاجها كافورا. عينا يشرب بها عباد الله يفجرونها تفجيرا. يوفون بالنذر ويخافون يوما كان شره مستطيرا. ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا. إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. إنا نخاف من ربنا يوما عبوسا قمطريرا. فوقاهم الله شر ذلك اليوم ولقاهم نضرة وسرورا. وجزاهم بما صبروا جنة وحريرا. متكئين فيها على الأرائك لا يرون فيها شمسا ولا زمهريرا. ودانية عليهم ظلالها وذللت قطوفها تذليلا ويطاف عليهم بآنية من فضة وأكواب كانت قوارير من فضة قدروها تقديرا ويسقون فيها كأسا كان مزاجها زنجبيلا عينا فيها تسمى سلسبيلا صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلى على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سلام على آل ياسين. السلام عليك يا داعي الله ورباني آياته. السلام عليك يا باب الله وديان دينه. السلام عليك يا خليفة الله وناصر حقه. السلام عليك يا حجة الله ودليل إرادته. السلام عليك يا تالي كتاب الله وترجمانه. السلام عليك في آناء ليلك وأطراف نهارك. السلام عليك يا بقية الله في أرضه. السلام عليك يا ميثاق الله الذي أخذه ووكده. السلام عليك يا وعد الله الذي ضمنه. السلام عليك أيها العلم المنصوب والعلم المصبوب والغوث والرحمة الواسعة وعدا غير مكذوب. السلام عليك حين تقوم. السلام عليك حين تقعد. السلام عليك حين تقرأ وتبين. السلام عليك حين تصلي وتقنت. السلام عليك حين تركع وتسجد. السلام عليك حين تهلل وتكبر. السلام عليك حين تحمد وتستغفر. السلام عليك حين تصبح وتمسي. السلام عليك في الليل إذا يغشى والنهار إذا تجلى. السلام عليك أيها الإمام المامون. السلام عليك أيها المقدم المامون. السلام عليك بجوامع السلام. أشهدك يا مولاي أني أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأن محمدًا عبده ورسوله لا حبيب إلا هو وأهله. وأشهدك يا مولاي أن عليًا أمير المؤمنين حجته والحسن حجته والحسين حجته وعلي بن الحسين حجته ومحمد بن علي حجته وجعفر بن محمد حجته وموسى بن جعفر حجته وعلي بن موسى حجته ومحمد بن علي حجته وعلي بن محمد حجته والحسن بن علي حجته. وأشهد أنك حجة الله أنتم الأول والآخر، وأن رجعتكم حق لا ريب فيها، يوم لا ينفع نفسا إيمانها لم تكن آمنت من قبل أو كسبت في إيمانها خيرا، وأن الموت حق، وأن ناكرا ونكيرا حق، وأشهد أن النشر حق، والبعث حق، وأن الصراط حق، والمرصاد حق، والميزان حق، والحشر حق، والحساب حق، والجنة والنار حق، والوعد والوعيد بهما حق. يا مولاي شقي من خالفكم، وسعد من أطاعكم، فاشهد على ما أشهدتك عليه، وأنا ولي لك بريء من عدوك، فالحق ما رضيتموه، والباطل ما استختموه، والمعروف ما أمرتم به، والمنكر ما نهيتم عنه، فنفسي مؤمنة بالله وحده لا شريك له، وبرسوله وبأمير المؤمنين، وبكم يا مولاي أولكم وآخركم، ونصرتي معدة لكم، ومودتي خالصة لكم. آمين آمين. صلى على محمد وآل محمد.
Ahsan, Brother Ali. Can we please recite one loud salawat for his amazing recitation? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. My condolences unto you all and to all the Muslim Ummah, and in particular to Imam Sahib al-Asri al-Zaman on this commemoration of the martyrdom of one of the children of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, Sayyeda Roqayah salamullahi alayha. Inshallah, tonight's program, the main lecture will be conducted by my dear brother Sayyid Abdullah AlNakeeb. Inshallah, I just wanted to send a quick announcement that we do have weekly programs every Friday, inshallah, and we also have a weekly Thursday night tafsir of Qu'ran program, followed by Dua Kumail. I want to also take this opportunity that we are around the time of Arba'een, and I want to wish everyone who is going on this blessed trip a safe trip, and I ask you all to keep us all in your dua, and remember everyone who was not blessed with this opportunity this year, and I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of us are granted this opportunity this year and every year that comes. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I won't take up any further of your time, so I ask we recite 3 loud salawat as we welcome my dear brother Sayyid Abdullah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبا القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، لا سيما بقية الله روحي وأرواح العالمين. لتراب مقدمه الفداء أما بعد يقول الله في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ذلك ومن يعظم شعائر الله فإنها من تقوى القلوب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states within the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Hajj, ayah number 32, and that is so, whomever honors the symbols of Allah indeed is from the piety of the hearts. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. Inshallah, tonight, as we are commemorating the young daughter of Abdullah al-Hussein, the topic of choice tonight is talking about the signs and symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And indeed, one of the greatest signs, which is Abdullah al-Hussein. Now, when looking at the particular notion of signs, and when we discuss in depth the understanding that there are some things that lead towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by extension. As an example, you can look at a tree, you can look at anything within existence, and in one way or another get towards the Creator. You can look at a tree, and then you begin to ask questions upon questions upon questions until understanding or looking towards that particular element and understanding that had it not been for a Creator, in its perfect notion, this would not exist. It will take you on that particular journey to understanding that there is a Creator. There are signs by extension, but there are signs that everything about them leads you towards Allah. Every aspect of their existence, their outer shell, their inner shell, everything leads you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the strongest examples is, for example, the Quran states that the Safa and the Marwa are from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from sha'air Allah. One of the greatest signs that leads you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is none other than Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa alihi. Taking this as a notion that everything that you learn, you understand, that you study, that you come across about the life of Rasulullah leads you towards Allah. Now, understanding this, we come across traditions that clearly state that I am from Hussein and Hussein is from me. Now, when we take this particular notion, Rasulullah himself says that Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein, ahsant. We need to analyze that Abdullah al-Hussein is a sign that leads you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why we come to the notion, the things that allow us to gain closeness towards Abdullah, which are signs in themselves, in order for us to hold on to the rope of Abdullah, in order for us to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because there are many ropes nowadays that people hold on to, this person and this person and this person, and they're not ma'soomeen. They have faults. There are problems. Other schools of thought hold on to these people that are fallible in many aspects. So when we try to hold on or gain closeness towards a perfect rope, that Abdullah leads us towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the correct path, there comes a notion of the sha'air of Abdullah, al-sha'air al-Husayniyya, the signs and symbols that lead you to understanding that this particular notion that's happening is a commemoration and a remembrance of Abdullah. Amongst these notions can be looked at to be the black flags, the grieving within this particular month, the beating of one's chest, other notions that are practices within this particular month that lead us towards Abdullah al-Hussein. Now, amongst these sha'air is the one that we're going to discuss tonight. And that is the understanding of crying for Abdullah al-Hussein. Now, when we go to this notion of crying for Abdullah al-Hussein, we go towards the books of tradition, Bihar al-Anwar. You open up Bihar al-Anwar and you go towards, as an example, a particular chapter that discusses the buka for Abdullah al-Hussein. When you go towards this particular chapter that discusses the buka for Abdullah al-Hussein, it comes to a particular tradition from Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. Imam al-Rida states towards one of his companions, he says, Yabna Shabib. Look at the notion. He says, if you are to cry, in kunta bakiyan, if you are to cry, then cry for Abu Abdullah. فابكي للحسين ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, cry for him because he was slaughtered like they slaughter a kebsh, a sheep. And that 18 of his family members were also martyred alongside, that there will never come like them on this earth. So there's a strong emphasis on crying for Abu Abdullah from our Imams. Imam al-Sadiq, as a notion, would give us an example that crying has its even rewards. As an example, he says that crying, an amount of a wing of a fly, that much you cry for Abu Abdullah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is able to wipe out oceans of sin. Now we look at these particular traditions and we begin to realize that the Ahlul Bayt, amongst many traditions, have spoken about crying for Abu Abdullah. There is a reward for crying. There is an emphasis for crying. Now tonight we're going to look at particular points that we need to look into to understand this particular sha'ira of Abu Abdullah and its importance to teach ourselves and our children. The first notion we want to look at tonight is, historically speaking, where can we date back the crying for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein? As in, when someone dies, usually it's after the person has passed away that a person cries upon them. But when it comes towards Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, is there a notion that we begin to understand that the mourning ceremonies, that these tears that were shed preceded the death itself? And if so, where do we find these particular notions within history? So the importance throughout history is number one. Number two, who were the Bakka'un within history? Who were the people known to be the weepers or the criers within history? Number three, what are the significance and the benefits associated with me and you crying for Abu Abdullah? Because we come towards the centers year upon year and we see it's custom to cry for Abu Abdullah. But sometimes our children will ask, then why do you cry? There are particular answers that you may need to explore furthermore to solidify in yourself and teach the next generation of why we are actually crying this particular tear for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and what benefit does it have on you and me in this very era that we're living in. Because there are people that come till now, there are attacks that, Abu Abdullah died so many years ago. Why do you still cry? Why do you still weep? Why do you still shed a tear? And these questions come within different groups of people, within different environments. And people come forward and think to themselves that they're very educated if they present these particular arguments. So how do we go about answering this? That's number three. Number four, what's the difference? And what's the different understandings behind to be crying, al-buka and tabaki, pretending to cry? Because there are these two different notions. Where does the reward system put these in perspective? If I am actually crying or I am pretending to cry? What does Islam say about this? And indeed, what does Rasulullah state about those that are pretending to cry for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein? And fifth, we're going to look at the notion of, is every tear that is shed for Abu Abdullah at the same level? Because there are many within history that have shed a tear for Abu Abdullah. Is every tear that is shed for Abu Abdullah of equal importance, of equal effect, of equal benefit to that person that sheds it? And what is the difference between ad-dam'a wal-abra? Linguistically, they both mean a tear that is shed. Dam'a and abra can be looked at to be a tear that is shed. But what is the difference between these two? And why does Abu Abdullah say أنا قتيل العبرات, not أنا قتيل الدمعات, as an example? So inshallah, these are the notions we're going to look at tonight to have an understanding of the importance of the tea shed for Abu Abdullah before we go towards the tragedy of the 4-year-old Ruqayah, daughter of Abu Abdullah. So inshallah, we can bless the majlis by reciting 3 of your loudest salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah. Allah. Allahumma salli. Historically speaking, when we go towards the books of tradition, when we go towards the Holy Quran, we want to analyze Abu Abdullah from the beginning of creation. Was there ever a time where Abu Abdullah is seen to be in the tradition, seen to be within the Holy Quran, that someone was saddened for him prior to him passing? We go towards the Holy Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 37, or ayah 37, we should say. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to Adam, alayhi afdal salatu wa salam, and says to him in the Holy Quran, when it discovers this particular transaction between Allah and Adam, the Quran states, فَتَلَقَّى آدَمْ مِنْ رَبِّهِ كَلِمَاتٍ. The Quran clearly states that Adam received from his Lord particular words. Quran needs tafsir. For us, we understand that he gained these particular words. What were these words? What were the understanding of these words? Many of us will come forward. These words can be that he taught him about the world, the earth, the names of different elements, different people, different things that will come into existence. They say no. You go towards Bihar al-Anwar, Alam al-Majlisi in chapter 44, page 245, he looks into this particular verse. And look what he says. He says, Adam one day is by the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he reads particular names. As he's reading the names, he says, Akhi Jibra'il, what are these names that are on the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So Jibra'il says, repeat after me. He says, say, Ya Hamidu bihaqqi Muhammad. Adam says, Ya Hamidu bihaqqi Muhammad. Ya Ali bihaqqi Ali. He says, Ya Ali bihaqqi Ali. Ya Fatiru bihaqqi Fatima. He says, Ya Fatiru bihaqqi Fatima. Ya Muhsinu bihaqqi al-Hasan. He says, Ya Muhsinu bihaqqi al-Hasan. Then he says, Ya Hussein wa minka al-Ihsan. So he says this, and then Adam looks towards Jibra'il. He says, Akhi Jibra'il. Look at the tradition. He says, Akhi Jibra'il, when you stated the first 4 names, I felt a sense of energy, a sense of strength. He says, all of a sudden, when you mentioned the last of those 5, I see that my heart was clenched, was in a state of sorrow, and uncontrollably there are tears that are being shed from my eyes. But I do not understand because I do not know these particular names. But for some reason, my heart has reacted in such a manner. My soul has been reacting to these particular names in such a manner. Oh, my brother Jibra'il, can you tell me, why is this the case? The first creation of mankind, Adam, says this. Jibra'il goes on to tell him this is what will occur. And it's a long tradition, going to a lot of detail of how Abu Abdullah will be martyred. And Jibra'il sees this. He hears this. He understands. Bihar al-Anwar. And even after him, we see that many traditions allude to the fact that the prophets themselves, in one way or another, were given the news of Karbala, given the story of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and what was to occur to him. When we go towards chapter 19 of the Holy Quran, Surah Maryam, we all know there are particular letters within the Holy Quran that no one knows what they mean. Alif Lam Mim, Alif Lam Mim Ra. What do they mean? Amongst them, chapter 19 of the Holy Quran, Surah Maryam, starts with letters. Kaf, Ha, Ya, Ain, Sad. Bihar al-Anwar, chapter 14, discovers and looks into this perspective. What do these letters mean? The Imams begin to tell us the story in which, likewise, Jibreel says the story towards Zakaria. Prophet Zakaria, amongst hearing this particular tradition, that what's to occur in Karbala, he also says, like Adam before him, when you given me the names of these people, I felt strength in the first four. When you mention Hussein, my heart aches me. Why? And he's told about Karbala. And Bihar al-Anwar discovers this particular perspective and says that Nabi Allah Zakaria takes the entire tragedy of Karbala and isolates it in these particular 5 letters, in which the tradition says, he says Kaf, that represents Karbala. Ha represents Halakul Itra, the demise of the holy household. Ya representing the killer of Abu Abdullah, Yazid. Ain, Kaf, Ha, Ya, Ain, representing Atash of Abu Abdullah, the thirst of Hussein in Karbala. Kaf, Ha, Ya, Ain, Sad. And he says Sad is prescribed for the patience of Abu Abdullah, Sabr al-Hussein. So you find these elements. Ibrahim, likewise, Bihar al-Anwar, chapter 44, page 243, page 244, you'll find different prophets are mentioned. Ibrahim is mentioned that one day he passes by Karbala, he's on a horse, he falls. When he falls off the horse, he splits his forehead. Ibrahim looks towards the sky and says, Oh Allah, is it for a sin that I have committed that this blood is shed? Am I being punished? Says no. But you have fallen in a land in which the blood of the final messenger's grandson will be spilt. I want to honor him by mixing that blood of yours from your forehead with the blood of Karbala. And likewise, we can see the similarities in Karbala. Abu Abdullah, amongst the things that occurred to him, was an arrow that struck his forehead and his blood gushed. So you'll find these similarities. Musa, likewise, he passes by Karbala, he injures himself, blood spills again, talks to Allah. Ismail, Sulaiman, while he's on the clouds, traveling from one place to another, they say the cloud that he was on circulated Karbala 3 times and then landed. Then he asks Allah why, gives him the news of Karbala. So you'll find the notion is there that prior towards the tragedy of Karbala, that all the prophets knew about it. One way or another, they learnt about Karbala and they shed a tear. Likewise, Rasulullah, they would say when Imam al-Hussein was born, he was born. He says to Asma, Asma, bring me Hussein. They name him in the tradition that Allah sets forth that particular name for Abu Abdullah. When he sets it, they say that when Asma brings Hussein and puts Abu Abdullah in the lap of Rasulullah, you know, sometimes when we get a newborn, we begin to cry, but those tears are tears of joy, tears of happiness, tears of beauty. Asma says, I look towards Rasulullah and he's crying. He says, I thought to myself, no, this is normal, but says, I saw him. No, it wasn't tears of joy. It wasn't tears of happiness. No, it was tears of grief, tears of lamentation, tears of someone that has just lost someone. Imagine those tears of Rasulullah at the birth of Imam al-Hussein. And then he says the story of what is to occur. So we'll find these notions there. And that's why after the demise and after the martyrdom of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, we'll find each and every one of our Imams in one way or another made it encompassing upon themselves to hold these banners up and shed a tear and tell their followers to shed a tear for Abu Abdullah. So much so that Imam Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman, when we read Ziyarat Nahiya al-Muqaddasa, what does he say? لَأَنْدُبَنَّكَ صَبَاحًا وَمَسَاءً, that I will mourn you day and night. وَلَأَبْكِيَنَّ عَلَيْكَ بَدَلَ الدُّمُوعِ دَمًا, that I will not just shed a tear, I will shed blood for that calamity of yours, Ya Aba Abdullah. It doesn't stop there. The tradition that we stated earlier, when we go towards Imam Rida alayhi salam speaking to Ibn Shabib, if you are to cry, then cry for Hussein. He goes on, what does he say? He says that tragedy made the skies cry, and the earth, and the angels. So many of us will think to ourselves, well, how does the skies cry? Surah Al-Dukhan, ayah 29. Allah speaks about the people of Fir'aun. He says very clearly that the skies did not cry for them. The skies did not cry for them. Signifying what? That the skies may cry. When the Imams are asked, who did the skies cry for? They reply by saying only two. Yahya and Hussein. And some of us may think to ourselves that we're just exaggerating, that the skies wept for Aba Abdullah. No. You go towards, not even an Islamic book, you go towards the book by the name of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, historic book showing you the major things or events that occurred in a particular timeline. You go towards the date 685 AD. 685 AD, you look. Many of the dates have many instances that occurred. This happened this year, this happened this year, this happened this year. This particular year, only one thing is recorded, that the skies rained blood. It's not a Shia resource, not an Islamic resource. It's a historic resource and reference. That the skies wept blood, and all that was milk and cheese turned into blood. You go towards Sunni references, they would say themselves, there was not a rock that day that you would lift lest that there was blood under it. Imam al-Askari, they say there was an occurrence at the time of Imam al-Askari. What happens? The Abbasid Khalifa of the time was in a state of famine, and they needed the rains to fall. So what would happen is he'd gather his people that, he's put turbans on to pray. Imam is in house arrest. He's got his people come forward in front of everyone and pray that particular salat and raise your hands so Allah will make it rain. They would gather the Muslims and they'd raise their hands. When they would, nothing would happen. Absolutely nothing. All of a sudden, there's this Christian man that comes. He raises his hand and he says, by the honor of Isa, allow it to rain. And he raises his hands. All of a sudden, rains begin to fall. So the people, all of a sudden, they're in a state of confusion. What's going on? Are we not on the correct religion? Or are we? Again, they come together. The Muslims raise their hand, nothing. The Christian man raises his hands. Again, the rains begin to fall. So what's going on? The Abbasid Khalifa says the only person that can solve this is the son of Rasulullah. He goes towards Imam al-Askari, come and save the ummah of your grandfather. So they go to him, they say, no problem. It's an easy fix. What's the fix? He says, next time that Christian man comes and he tries to raise his hand, do not allow that thing which he has concealed under his garments to be unveiled under the sky. He has something. Do not let it be unveiled under the sky. He tries to raise his hand, you grab his hand and you take that which is under his garments. So again, the Muslims come, they raise their hand, nothing. This Christian man comes, he's about to raise his hand, they grab his hand. They see there's something in his garments, they take it, they cover it, they take it towards the Imam. What happened? Did the rains fall? He says, no, nothing happened. He says, well, how did you know there was something in his garments? He says, it's very simple. He says, why? He says, what he had under his garments was a bone that belonged to one of the many prophets of Allah. One. If a bone of a prophet of Allah is unveiled under the skies begin to rain, cry, let's say, in honor of that particular bone. So the question there is, if we say that weeping is there, how can someone come forward and reply by saying the skies didn't weep if the bone and the blood and the flesh of the greatest of all prophets lay in Karbala for 3 days? How can you say that the skies didn't weep if a mere bone of a normal prophet makes the skies weep? Imagine, as we stated, Rasulullah would say, Husaynun minni wa ana min Husayn, that it's unveiled under the sky. That there are 4,000 angels in the same tradition that came to support Abu Abdullah, but they found that he has been murdered in the way that he was and martyred, that they stayed alongside him, and they will stay there until the Imam Sahib al-Asri wal Zaman will return, and they will be of his supporters and part of his army. So we understand this. Not just the prophets, not just the elements, the skies, the earth, they cried for Abu Abdullah. And you say to yourself, why should we cry? Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman cries tears of blood. Why do we cry? But brings us to the next point. Who were the weepers within history? If we're talking about crying, who were those that were known to cry more than anyone else? The weepers. Al-Bakka'un in traditions. The Imams say that there were 5. Who were they? The first was the first prophet Adam, that he was known to be of the 5 known as Al-Bakka'un. The Adam in traditions used to cry and cry so much. I want you to imagine amongst his cheeks that the water dug in his cheek 2 rivers. They would say how much he cried, and how much you have to cry for the water to make an effect on your cheeks, like 2 rivers. That's how much he cried. The second of which that the Quran refers to in chapter 12 of the Holy Quran, ayah 84, which is Yaqub crying upon Yusuf. وَبِيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ, that his eyes went blind from that grief over Yusuf. The third is Yusuf upon his father within the jails, that people would say, Yusuf, you have annoyed us with how much you've been crying for all these years upon losing your father or being distant from your father. Number 4 is Fatima Zahra, and how much she cried over the loss of Rasulullah. The oppression that was there, that the people would tell Ali, oh Ali, that Fatima's cry has annoyed us. So he had to take on the outskirts and make that which is called Baytul Ahzan for her. Fatima. And the 5th of the Bakka'un is none other than Imam al-Sajjad, Imam Ali Zayn al-Abidin, of what he saw in Karbala. That he cried and cried so much that they would say that he never ate, nor did he drink anything except it was salty, because his tears would fall into anything he would drink, or would fall into anything that he would eat, because he would remember Abu Abdullah, remember his father, remember the thirst. Imagine that these were the Bakka'un. Amongst the people that cried was a prophet which was known as Nabi Allah Nuh. Nuh, if we look at the Arabic language, comes from An-Niyaha, for example, An-Nawh, which means to weep. So does Allah call a prophet the weeper? No. He attained that particular name, Nuh, because of how much he cried. Initially, when you go to the traditions, his name was Abdul Ghaffar. The prophet was named Abdul Ghaffar, but because of how much he used to weep, he was referred to as Nuh. So that element of crying is there within history, within the infallibles, within our prophets, and specifically for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Now, when we take these elements and we say to ourselves, then what's the benefit now? So we understand that there are weepers, that there are people that have cried within history, but nowadays, I think that it occurred so many years ago. Why do we still cry? Why is there an emphasis? What is the benefit for us? Many points. I'm going to mention a few tonight within the time that we have. The first of which is to showcase love and obedience. Why? When we showcase love and obedience, Rasulullah says very clearly, all the prophets that preceded him, no one asked anything for their message except our prophet. What did he ask for? قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. I ask nothing of you, all the prophets, except our prophet. He says, no, I do ask something for the message that I bring. I want you to show mawaddah to my new ones. What's the difference between mawaddah and mahabba? Question. We hear mahabba and we hear mawaddah. What's the difference? Mahabba can be looked at to be internal. I can have a mahabba of someone in my heart, that I love someone within my heart. Mawadda is an external manifestation of that mahabba. So mawadda, I want to openly show that love that I have. So Rasulullah doesn't say, yeah, it's all right to love in your heart, no problem. He says, I want you to showcase that love. Whether it be through supporting them, speaking for them, speaking out in their defense, remembering them, shedding a tear for them. That we are, when we shed a tear for Abu Abdullah, doing that which Rasulullah did. Ifrahu li farahina wahzanu li huznina. Be happy for our happiness and be sad for our sadness. Imam Sahib al-Asr Zaman, what does he say? لأندبنك صباحا ومساء. That I'm in a state of mourning, day and night. That's why the ulama, what do they say for us? Amongst the recommended acts to do and to perform is when you wake up, you say, Wa Husayna. Before you sleep, you say, Wa Husayna. Why? Because you're following in the footsteps of Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman. In that notion, so the first is creating a closer connection between us and the Ahlul Bayt, us and the Imam of our time. That love, that connection, that solidifies. Especially when the Imam comes, we know to ourselves that we are performing things which please the Imam and not displease him. We're following in the footsteps of Ahlul Bayt and not in the footsteps of the others that are the enemies of Ahlul Bayt. So that's number one, to showcase love and to be solidified on the same footsteps that they put in front of us. First benefit. Second benefit is an interesting one. In a tradition between Rasulullah and Fatima al-Zahra, that Rasulullah speaks about you and I right now. Where? When he tells Fatima about the tragedy that will occur in Karbala. He says to her, Fatima, this is what's occurring. Fatima begins to weep and weep and weep. And when she stops, Rasulullah continues. What does he say? Fatima is asking him, who will be there, O Rasulullah, to assist, to be there alongside, to be there as support? What does he say? في زمان خال مني ومنك ومن أبيه. That this time that he will be murdered, that he will be killed, Karbala will occur in a time that it is not having me or you, Fatima, or his father Ali to be beside him. Look what Rasulullah says towards Fatima al-Zahra. He says, Oh Fatima, I know what you're going to ask. He says, yes, Ya Rasulullah, I want to ask who will be there to remember him and cry over him. Look at the words. Who will be there to remember and cry over him? Look at the reply of Rasulullah. He says, there will be women from my ummah that will cry over the woman in Karbala. And their husbands likewise will be there to cry over the men in Karbala. And this aza will be renewed every generation. Now what is he saying? He says, Allah will create for Abu Abdullah people that will remember his name and shed a tear over him. Who's he talking about? Who's he talking about? That one of the benefits is that Rasulullah on his own tongue has mentioned you and I being of those that remember and mourn and cry over Abu Abdullah. The third is the aspect of that tea being a weapon for your growth, a weapon for your purification. How? And when you say that I cry a tea for Abu Abdullah, the tea is, when we look within the traditions, within the du'as, we go towards du'a kumail, Thursday nights, what do we say? ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه. You're allowed to say وسلاحه البكاء. That Amir al-Mu'minin is trying to showcase to us, a tea is used as a weapon. Is a weapon against who? How? We'll get to that shortly. But the understanding there that Amir al-Mu'minin is saying that it can be used as a weapon to purify yourself, to fight the inner evils. Third benefit. Fourth benefit that we can take, that we're going to mention tonight, is the benefit of the reward that is there for us. كل عين باكية يوم القيامة إلا عين بكت على الحسين. That every eye will be weeping in the day of judgment, except that eye that shed a tear for Abu Abdullah. That everyone will be in a state that you are crying that what's befalling you, except those that have shed a tear for Abu Abdullah. Now, many of us may not understand. We may not understand why Abu Abdullah holds such a significance. Why, when it comes to the reward structure for Abu Abdullah, there is a reward structure like none other. That everyone else, this is the reward, this is the reward. When it comes to Abu Abdullah, you think to yourself, why is Allah giving this person this much? Why one tea drop wipes away oceans of sin? Why? You see, one of our ulama, it's a very long tradition. I wish I can have time to go through all of it. But at the end of the tradition, look what happens. This alim comes across a tradition that says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will look towards the people that visit the shrine of Abu Abdullah on the day of Arafah before he looks at the people on the mountain in Hajj. Mountain of Arafah, he looks towards the Zuwar of Abu Abdullah with the eye of mercy before them. So he says, it doesn't make sense to me. A person can travel, 5, 10 meters, 100 meters, walk towards Abu Abdullah's shrine if they live amongst the district of Karbala. Whereas these people have given up their life to go towards Hajj and waiting for Allah to forgive them with the eye of mercy. That on the day of Arafah, he looks towards the visitors of Abu Abdullah. Even that, he looks towards them before the mountain. So he goes and goes and goes. Long story short, he comes across someone that gives him a story. This person says, oh Sayyid, I have something. Because he was a marja, so he kept getting asked questions, given advice. So this person comes towards the Sayyid and he says, Sayyid, let me tell you a story. So he says, there was a person that was a king, went out hunting. When he went out hunting, he lost his troops. And he was isolated by himself in the middle of the desert. He roamed and roamed until he saw someone or he saw something at the edge. As he approached, he saw it was a tent that had a lady. So he asks, he says, oh lady, who are you here with? What's happening? She says, it's just me, this sheep, and my son. He goes out in the morning, hunts. He doesn't catch anything. We get from the milk to suffice us so we can survive. All we have, tent, sheep, and my boy. So he says, allow me to rest. So he comes into the tent, sits down. The boy comes, he sees this person is not a normal person. He looks like royalty. So he goes towards the sheep, kills it, and serves the sheep as food for the king. So the king looks at it, he says, I know all you have is this sheep. Why did you offer it to me? He says, it's all I have, but I know you are a king. I can see it, that you're royalty. You're not used to milk. I haven't caught anything, so I gave you everything that I have, which is the sheep. So the king says, indeed, I am the king. And I am in this district. If ever a time you need anything, you come towards me. So he goes, they have nothing to live on. Day, 2, 3 days, he returns. When he returns, the king is amongst his people. And he says, this is the boy that I told you about. He says, what did you tell us? The one that sacrificed what he had. He says, amongst these people, what should I give to repay him? Look at the notion. What should I give to repay this boy that he sacrificed a sheep? So one of them would say, give him 10 sheep instead of that one sheep. Another person says, no, give him this much money to recompense. Another says, no, give him a land that he can herd sheep. Everyone gave their ideas. So the king, look how he replies to understand. He says, no, all of you have been unjust to this young boy. Why? He says, it's not about what he gave me. It's in the quality. How? He says, he gave me everything he had. Everything he had, he gave towards me. It's only fair that I give up everything I have for him. So when we look at Abu Abdullah, he gives everything for Allah. Everything. Is it not justifiable that Allah gives everything towards anyone that serves Abu Abdullah, sheds a tear for Abu Abdullah, walks towards Abu Abdullah, has anything done in the name of Abu Abdullah? There's no second thoughts when you look at it from that angle. Everything he gave up, from his 6-month-old, from his youngest to his oldest, to himself, from the blood of his heart, from Abbas, gives it towards Allah. Take until you are sufficed, O Allah. So when it comes to every tear that is shed, are they all the same? No. Why? Because when you go towards, let's say, the words of Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli as an example. He says, when you look at the tears can be looked at in many notions. Someone can stab his toe walking into the mosque and begin to cry. Doesn't mean anything. A person may see something on Netflix or whatever have you. He didn't say that, but I'm saying that. But it can cry for any reason. You may be hurt from something. You may want revenge. You may see something. You may be hurt one way or another that you begin to cry. It's not those tears that we want. The tears of Abu Abdullah are different tears. Those are the ones that can be utilized as a weapon. You can't use the tears that, you stubbed your foot and you're in pain and you cry. Those are not the tears that Amir al-Mu'min is talking about to be used as weapons. Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, he says that Shaitan says that an haram glance is an arrow of Satan. When you look at someone in a haram manner, that is an arrow of Satan, the weapon of Shaitan. He says those tears that you cry for Abu Abdullah, because we need to know when we cry for Abu Abdullah, why do we cry? How can we use these tears? He says, imagine those tears that are shed for Abu Abdullah are weapons. Imagine they are arrows. They fall off your cheek into your hands. Where are you going to place those arrows? That weapon of yours. Are you going to attack that eye of yours and perfect it? Are you going to use that arrow, which is your tear, on your tongue to perfect it? On your anger to perfect it? How are you going to use those tears to perfect yourself? Think about it as a weapon. Where do you want to focus the weapon first, second, third? How will you attack yourself? What does he say? He says the enemy is our own ignorance. Jihad al-Akbar is against ourselves. First and foremost, when it comes to buka and tabaki, Surah Al-Zumar, Rasulullah is saying the surah when he comes towards verse or ayah 71, where he's talking about the people that are going to be dragged towards hellfire against their will. When they're dragged, every one of the Ansar begins to cry, except a young boy. Rasulullah is looking at him and says, oh boy, everyone else of the Ansar is crying. Why are you not crying? Why are you not crying? He says, oh Rasulullah, I want to, but the tea does not come out. Many of us, we come to a notion where we try to cry, but we cannot. Whatever reason. We can't cry. Rasul says to him, fatabaki. Tabaki, you know what it means? It means if you cannot cry, the tears are not shed, then be in a state of grief. Put your head down. Feel the emotion. Try to cry. Scream, wail if you need to. He looks at Rasulullah and says, Rasulullah, is it the same reward? He says, yes. That grief that you feel is enough. That you will get the equal rewards. So if we cannot cry, try to cry, as long as that is not hypocritical. Not just to show people that I'm trying to cry. No. It's for yourself to feel the agony, to feel the grief, to connect with Abu Abdullah and his tragedy. When we go towards the traditions of Imam al-Baqir, what does he say? Imam al-Baqir, when he's asked, why can we not cry? He says, Ma jafatil uyun illa, from what? That the eyes are not dry, lest it's from the hardening of the heart. Illa min qaswatil qulub. وما قست القلوب إلا من كثرة الذنوب. He says, I cannot cry. It may be a causality of my heart hardening. And the cause of my heart hardening is because of the sins that I've committed repetitively. That's why when you look at the people that are tyrants within history, the oppressors within history, they have hardened hearts. Nothing moves them. Nothing. Whereas you look at Ahlul Bayt, Ali ibn Abi Talib, people say to him, you've placed a wrong governor, or a governor that does not listen to us. He begins to weep. Weep. The traditions, what do they say? The poems that come forward about Amir al-Mu'mineen, huwa al-bakka fil mihrab laylan. And he was known to cry and cry in the nights. Imagine, these are the Ahl Bayt. This is what we're trying to strive towards. But not every tear is the same. When we go towards Karbala, what do we understand? Do you think Shimr didn't cry? Question. Umar ibn Sa'ad didn't cry. They cried. They shed tears. But those tears need to be intertwined with your actions. What's the use? You saw your Imam. Shimr saw his Imam. Umar ibn Sa'ad saw his Imam. But they went and killed the Imam. Umar ibn Sa'ad couldn't handle Abu Abdullah lying on the plains of Karbala alongside his son, Ali al-Akbar. He was crying, had to look away. Couldn't handle it. But he still continued in his actions. We can cry for Abu Abdullah. Jawadi Amni, what does he say? You have those weapons now. How do you use them? What actions are you going to perfect? Difference between Abra and Dam'a, and I conclude tonight. Dam'a, tear. Abra, also tear. But why is Imam Hussein known as Qatilul Abarat? Abra, the word that's utilized, when you delve into the origins, can be looked at Ma'bar, Ubur, bridge. The idea is through this tragedy that you are going from one place or one state to another. That you are now somewhere, but through Abu Abdullah, you are somewhere else. Ana qatilul abarat. That grief, that emotion, that tear that you're shedding for Abu Abdullah, do not allow it to let you stay in the same position. Allow it to be a bridge for you to go from one place to another. Hussein, what is he known as? Misbahul Huda wa Safinatu Najat. That I am the beacon of guidance and the ark of salvation. The beacon are for those that are in complete darkness. Beacon shows you the light. When you are going Qatilul Abarat from one state to another, he's saying, I am the beacon, the light of guidance. I'm going to take you from darkness towards light if you follow me. if you use that grief to take you where you need to go, to take you from that sinful place towards that which you purify yourself. And that's why when we go towards the tragedies that occurred, that people used Abu Abdullah in order for them to be perfect beings. They saw where they are, the sinful nature, and how they can perfect themselves, how they can go on that bridge of Abu Abdullah from darkness towards light. We stated Imam Sahib al-Asr was, what does he say? لَأَبْكِيَنَّ عَلَيْكَ بَدَلَ الدُّمُوعِ دَمًا. A companion sees of the ulama that see Imam Sahib al-Asr was Zaman in a dream. When they see him in a dream, they ask him, Ya Sahib al-Zaman. We read in Ziyarat al-Muqaddasa, لَأَبْكِيَنَّ عَلَيْكَ بَدَلَ الدُّمُوعِ دَمًا. Question for you, O Imam. When you say this, those tears of blood, who do you shed them for? Who do you shed them for? So he says, do you shed these tears for Abu Abdullah? Those tears, are they for Abu Abdullah? He says to him, if Abu Abdullah saw, he would shed them as well. Are these tears for Ali al-Akbar? He says, if Ali was to see, he would shed as well. Abbas, Radi'. You know what the Imam says? He says, these tears are for my auntie Zainab. For my auntie Zainab and what she saw in Karbala, after Karbala. Imam Zain al-Abidin, Abu Hamza al-Thumali, comes towards him. He says, he sees him crying, like we stated, that he would not be an instance except that when he was to be drinking water or eating food, that it would be salty because of how much he wept. Abu Hamza al-Thumali comes to him. He says these words. He says, Ya ibn Rasulillah, inna al-qatla lakum aada wa karamatakum min Allah al-shahada. Oh Imam, I see you weeping and weeping, but al-qatlu lakum aada, to be killed is normality for you. You are the household of Rasulullah, you've been prosecuted. And Allah has honored you. وَكَرَامَتَكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ الشَّهَادَةِ. Allah has honored you by giving you this rank of martyrdom. He says, Bala, Bala, Ya Abu Hamza, but I do not weep for what befall us in Karbala, but I weep because have you ever seen a time where a lady from Bani Hashim has been taken captive from a city to one? That a lady has been dragged from one city to another. He's saying that I am crying for my auntie Zainab. I cry for Zainab al-Aqila. But the question for tonight is that they all cried. Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman would cry for Sayyida Zainab. Imam Sajjad would cry for Sayyida Zainab. Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, tears of blood. Sajjad would say when he's asked what's the most difficult time, 3 times he would say, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham. When he would say this, the question then remains, what did Zainab cry over? What did Zainab see in Sham? What befell of the tragedies of Sayyida Zainab? I take you towards a khariba in Sham. The lady that we're commemorating tonight, they would say that there was a night where Sayyida Zainab is running from one orphan to another, trying to make them be quiet, trying to make them sleep. They're crying from hunger, crying from thirst, crying from tiredness. Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman would say in Ziyarat al-Muqaddasa would say, imagine the image, that he wouldn't say that they were held in ropes. Many a times you'll find when someone is captured as captives, They would put ropes around their hands, around their necks. He would say in the ziyarah that they chained them with metal chains. Imagine in the heat of the desert what that would do to their hands, what that would do with their necks, what that would do to their legs when they're walking in the heat. Imagine a Roqayah, a 4-year-old, young Roqayah being chained, being dragged from one city to another in these moments, that she is feeling the pain, feeling the hunger, feeling the thirst, feeling the whips of Bani Umayyah. All of a sudden she falls asleep. Zainab makes them all fall asleep. Just about when Zainab's about to rest, the night is silent, then all of a sudden there is a cry from the edge of the kharib. A young Roqayah begins to wake up screaming, Aba Hussein, oh my father Hussein, where are you? Aba Abdullah, where is my father Hussein? Zainab would have said the whole journey. She would say, oh Roqayah, every time she would ask that your father is in a long journey, oh Roqayah, that he's not going to attend us anytime soon. All of a sudden Roqayah would wake. She would say, I want my father Aba Abdullah, I want my father Hussein, I've seen him in my dreams, I want to see him now. And she would cry. I want you to see the heart of a 4-year-old, wanting to see her father, wanting to embrace her father, running towards her father when she sees him in the distance. She would cry until that cry would annoy the people sleeping in the palace. You'd find that all of a sudden that Yazid would be awoken from this cry of a 4-year-old Roqayah. When he would wake up, he'd ask his men, what's the reason that this young girl was crying, that she's annoyed us? We're trying to fall asleep in our palaces, in our lavish lifestyles, we're trying to fall asleep. They would say that there is a 4-year-old daughter of Aba Abdullah that wants her father Hussein. Yazid, imagine the heart that he had, what he would do next. Imagine he would give, for example, food, a toy, something to elude her, to distract the 4-year-old. No, what would he say? He would say, take the head of her father, Aba Abdullah. Take that head towards her. She wants her father. Give her her father, Aba Abdullah. They would take Aba Abdullah's head, put it on a platter, and they would cover the head of Aba Abdullah. From the distance, Roqayah would see someone bringing something that was covered. They would look towards Sayyida Zainab. They would say, Roqayah would say to Zainab, oh my auntie, I did not ask for food. I asked for my father, Aba Abdullah. Remember, till this very moment, she doesn't know that her father Hussein has died, nor that his head has been severed from his body. She's waiting to see her father, Aba Abdullah. All of a sudden, they take the platter, they put it in front of Roqayah, still covered. She looks at her auntie Zainab, oh my auntie, what is this? All of a sudden, they remove that particular veil from that head of Aba Abdullah. She looks towards a head in front of her. Till now, she hasn't realized that this is the head of her father, Aba Abdullah, in front of her. She looks at Zainab again. She looks towards the head. She begins to recognize through the blood stains on the hair and the beard that was the beautiful face of her father, Aba Abdullah. She would look towards him. She would throw herself on the head of Hussein. She would say, Aba, man alladhi qata'a ra'sak. Oh my father, who is the one that has severed your head from your body? He would say, Aba ya Hussein, man alladhi khadhaba shaybatak. Oh my father Hussein, who is the one that has stained your beard with the blood of your neck? Aba ya Hussein, man alladhi aytamani ala صغر سني. She would say, oh my father Hussein, who is the one that has made me an orphan at such a young age. She would continue saying, Abba, 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 until that voice became softer, softer and softer, until Abba, Abba, Abba would be no longer there. Zainab would think to herself that she's tired. Roqayah is tired. She saw the head of her father, Abu Abdullah. She's been running from one city to another. Food, no drink. That's because she's been screaming for her father that she fell asleep. All of a sudden, Imam Zain al-Abidin would look towards Zainab. What would he say? He would say, Amma ya Zainab, Azzam Allah lak al-ajr. She would say, who has passed away now? We've lost so many on this journey. Who has now all of a sudden returned towards Allah? He would say, Azzam Allah lak al-ajr be my sister Roqayah. With my sister Roqayah has returned towards Allah. Imagine Zainab at that moment running towards Roqayah, looking at Roqayah, embracing Roqayah, holding her in her arms. But you know what the true tragedy is? It's what happens after. She imagined an auntie, how can she wash her body of a 4-year-old? How can she wash her body and bury her body of a 4-year-old Roqayah, daughter of Abu Abdullah? The traditions would say that they would take this body from one lady to another to say who would be able to wash this delicate 4-year-old's body. Every time she would take Roqayah towards a lady to wash the body, the lady would say, I'm not washing this body. Another lady, they would say, we will not wash this body of a 4-year-old. Then she would say, Zainab, why do you not wash this body of a 4-year-old? You know what the reply is? They would say, we are afraid that this disease on her body, this color on her body may be contagious. We may be affected from that which is on the body of this 4-year-old Roqayah. You know what Zainab would reply by saying? She would say, oh lady, this is not a disease. This is not an ailment, not an illness. These are the bruises of where the armies were whipping the 4-year-old Roqayah. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un wa sayalamu alladhina zalamu ala Muhammadin ayya munqalabin yanqalibun wal aqibatu lil muttaqin. Raise your hands, brothers and sisters. We all have our hajat. We all have our needs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our questions that need answering, our du'as that need answering. With these tears shed for the daughter of Abu Abdullah, know very well that Abu Abdullah himself, inshaAllah, God willing, will grant it. So we pray towards Allah in these nights with the covenants that are still not dry upon our cheeks, that we aim to be steadfast on the path of Hussein. We aim to shed a tear year in, year out, and use it as weapons to perfect ourselves. That we make a covenant to Allah that through our grief we want to travel on that bridge from our lesser self to our higher self and follow in the footsteps of Ahlul Bayt. And we pray to Allah that if we die, that we are resurrected amongst the companions of Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman with the Surah al-Mubarakat al-Fatiha. But before it, 3 of your loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Hussein